The winter in Cleveland doesn't care if you're 79 or 19. It bites just the same. I sat in my armchair, the one Martha bought me for our 40th anniversary, clutching my old flip phone like it was a lifeline. It was. On that phone were 3 saved voicemails. Ray, don't forget the milk. Ray, I love you. Hurry home. And the last one, whispered from a hospital bed. Ray, I'm not scared as long as you're there. I played them every night. They were the only way I could still hear her soul. But tonight the house was silent. The furnace didn't kick in. I reached for the lamp, but the switch clicked uselessly. Darkness swallowed the room. I fumbled for my heart medication on the side table, my old hands shaking, but I couldn't see the dosage. My breath came out in white clouds. I checked my phone for light, but the screen stayed black. Dead. I plugged it into the wall, but the juice was gone. They'd cut the power. The next morning, I walked 3 miles to the cellular store in the slush. My knees screamed, but I didn't listen. I stood at the sleek white counter, feeling like a ghost in a world of glass. A young man with a name tag that read Tyler looked at me like I was a smudge on his window. I need a charge, I said, my voice cracking. The power's out at home, and I need to hear my wife. Tyler didn't even look up from his tablet. Sir, that model is ancient. We don't even carry the cables for those anymore. You need an upgrade. I pushed the phone toward him, my knuckles white. I don't want an upgrade. I just need the messages. They're all I have left of her. He sighed, a loud theatrical sound that made the teenage girl behind me giggle. Look, Pops, if the battery's fried and the port is corroded, the data's likely gone. We aren't a museum. Why haven't you paid your bill anyway? Your account shows a disconnect notice from 3 weeks ago. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. I mailed the check. I knew I had. I'm a veteran, I whispered, though I hated using that card. Please. Tyler pushed the phone back toward me with one finger, his lip curling in a way that made me feel smaller than the dirt on my boots. No pay, no play. Move along, you're blocking the line. As I turned to leave, my foot caught on the rug, and I stumbled, the phone skittering across the tile. The phone hit the floor with a plastic clack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet store. I dropped to my knees, the cold dampness of the melted snow soaking into my trousers. My fingers scrambled against the linoleum, desperate to find the device. I felt the eyes of the other customers on me, pitying, annoyed, or worse, indifferent. Tyler didn't come around the counter to help. He just tapped his stylus against his palm. I finally closed my hand around the phone. The plastic casing had a fresh crack running across the small external screen. I stood up slowly, trying to maintain some shred of the dignity I'd spent 43 years building at the steel mill. I didn't look at anyone as I pushed through the heavy glass doors back into the Ohio wind. The cold hit me like a physical blow. I had $62 in my wallet, meant for the grocery store and the dog's kibble. My pension check hadn't arrived, and the VA office had put me on hold for 4 hours yesterday before the lines simply went dead. I reached my small house on the edge of Parma. It looked tired, the gray siding peeling like old skin. My daughter, Sarah, was parked in the driveway in her shiny white SUV. She didn't get out to greet me. She waited until I was at the porch steps before rolling down the window. Dad, where have you been? I've been calling you for 2 days. Your phone is off. I gripped the railing. The power's out, Sarah. And the phone, it's broken. I think I lost your mother's voice. Sarah didn't look sad. She looked inconvenienced. She climbed out, her expensive boots clicking on the pavement. This is exactly what I was talking about, Dad. You can't even manage a utility bill anymore. The bank called me. They said your account is overdrawn. How does that even happen? I looked at her, my only child, and felt a strange distance. She smelled like expensive perfume and stress. I paid it, I said firmly. I wrote the check and put it in the blue box by the Walmart. Sarah shook her head, pulling a stack of papers from her leather bag. The world doesn't work on blue boxes anymore, Dad. It's all digital.
You're failing, and it's getting dangerous. I've made an appointment with a consultant at Sunnyvale. It's a beautiful assisted living facility." My heart skipped a beat, a sharp, jagged pain in my chest. I'm not leaving Martha's house.
Sarah didn't listen. She never did anymore. She just followed me into the dark, freezing house, her phone flashlight cutting through the shadows like a searchlight. "Look at this, Dad. It's freezing in here. You're going to get pneumonia, and then I'll be the one stuck dealing with the hospital bills." I ignored her and went to the kitchen, lighting a single candle I kept in a drawer. The flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows of the copper pots Martha used to polish every Sunday. I picked up the phone again, staring at the cracked screen. If I could just get it to turn on once, I could record the messages onto something else, anything else. "I just want the messages, Sarah," I whispered. She was busy opening my mail, tearing into envelopes I hadn't even touched yet. "Forget the messages, Dad. Mom's gone. You're obsessing over a ghost while your life is falling apart. Look at this, a late notice from the property tax office? You told me you had that covered." I felt a flush of shame. I'd forgotten. Between the grief and the brain fog that seemed to settle in every evening, the dates had started to blur. "I'll go to the bank tomorrow," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'll fix it." Sarah let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "With what money? You've spent your savings on those vintage repairs for your truck and God knows what else. I'm taking your car keys, Dad, for your own safety." I turned, the candle trembling in my hand. "You have no right, Sarah. I've worked since I was 16. I've never asked for a handout. This is my home." She stepped closer, and for a second I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Not love, but a cold, calculating resolve. "I have power of attorney, remember? You signed it after the funeral when you couldn't even remember your own zip code. I'm doing this because I love you, even if you're too stubborn to see it." She grabbed my keys from the hook by the door and walked out, leaving me in the dark. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence of the house feeling like a heavy shroud. I thought of Martha. If she were here, she would have known what to do. I picked up the broken phone and pressed the power button over and over, praying for a miracle. The screen stayed black, but then, for a split second, a faint blue glow appeared before vanishing again. That tiny blue light was enough to give me hope. I didn't sleep that night. I wrapped myself in 3 blankets and sat by the window, watching the street lights until the sun began to peek over the rusted skyline of the city. I had to get to the bank. If I could just prove I had the money, I could get the power back on, charge the phone, and find a way to save Martha's voice. I walked to the bus stop, my breath hitching in my chest. The bus was late, filled with people heading to work, their faces buried in their own glowing screens. I felt like a relic, a piece of machinery that had outlived its purpose. When I finally reached the bank, the marble floors felt cold and unforgiving. I waited in line for 40 minutes, my back aching. When I finally got to the teller, a woman with a kind face but tired eyes, I pushed my passbook across the counter. "I need to check my balance," I said, "and I need to withdraw $300 from my utilities." She typed for a moment, then frowned. She looked at the screen, then at me. "Mr. Carter, I'm seeing a flag on this account. The primary access has been changed to a joint management status. There's a stop payment order on all manual withdrawals over $50. I felt the room tilt. "What? That's my pension, my Social Security." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It says here your daughter, Sarah Miller, is the primary executor. She moved the bulk of the funds into a restricted trust yesterday afternoon. There's only $42 left in the liquid account." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my fingernails left marks in the wood. She didn't just take my keys, she took my life. She was starving me out of my own home. "I didn't authorize that," I managed to say, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm sorry, sir. The paperwork is all here. Unless you have a legal representative to challenge the POA, my hands are tied." I walked out of the bank into the blinding white light of the snowy afternoon. I felt invisible. I headed toward the VA office, hoping for a miracle, but as I crossed the street, I saw a familiar sight at the pawn shop on the corner. There, in the window, was my set of professional-grade mechanics tools, the ones I'd kept in my garage for decades. Sarah had already started selling my life piece by piece. I pushed open the heavy door of the pawn shop, the bell above the entrance chiming like a funeral knell. The air inside smelled of stale tobacco and old metal. Behind the counter sat a man with grease under his fingernails and a skeptical squint. "The tools in the window," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and exhaustion. "Those are mine. My daughter had no right to bring them here." The man didn't look impressed. He leaned back, his chair creaking. "Lady came in this morning, had the paperwork, had the ID. Said her dad was going into a home and needed to clear out the garage. I gave her a fair price. They're mine now, old-timer." I looked at my wrenches, my heavy-duty ratchets, the tools that had fixed the cars of half the neighborhood for free because I couldn't stand to see a neighbor struggle. They were more than metal. They were my identity. "I'll buy them back," I said, reaching for my wallet, though I knew I only had $60 left. The man laughed, a dry, rasping sound. $700 for the set, not a penny less. I stood there, defeated, the weight of my 79 years finally feeling like too much to bear. I left the shop and started the long walk back. I didn't have money for the bus anymore. Every step was a battle. My mind kept drifting back to the phone. If Sarah was selling my tools, she would sell the house next. And once the house was gone, the landline would be disconnected, the internet gone, and any chance of recovering those messages would vanish forever. I reached my street and saw a black sedan parked in front of my house. A man in a suit was walking around the perimeter with a clipboard, taking photos of the porch. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the cold air. The man looked up, offering a practiced, hollow smile. "Just doing an appraisal, Mr. Carter. Your daughter said you were looking for a quick close. It's a nice lot, needs work, but the location is prime for a flip." I didn't say a word. I walked past him, went inside, and locked the door. I sat in the darkness, the cold now seeping into my very bones. I pulled the broken phone from my pocket. I didn't try to turn it on this time. I just held it against my cheek, weeping silently for the first time since Martha's funeral. My daughter was erasing me while I was still breathing. The next few days were a blur of hunger and cold. I ate cold beans from a can and drank tap water, saving the last of my money for the dog, Buster. But Buster was gone too. Sarah had taken him to the shelter while I was at the bank, claiming I was neglectful. The house felt like a tomb. On the fourth day, there was a knock at the door. I expected Sarah or the appraiser, but when I opened it, a young man was standing there. He was wearing a worn hoodie and holding a toolbox. It was the kid from the neighborhood, Leo. I'd fixed his bike a dozen times when he was a boy. "Mr. Carter, I heard about the power. My dad said the bank messed up your checks." He looked at my pale face and the way I was shivering. "I brought a portable generator and a heater. It's not much, but it'll keep you warm." I wanted to refuse. My pride was all I had left, but the smell of the warm air from the heater he was carrying made my eyes water. "Thank you, Leo," I whispered. He set everything up in the kitchen. As the heater hummed to life, the feeling started to return to my fingers. Leo noticed the broken flip phone on the table. "Is that the one with Mrs. Carter's messages?" I nodded. "The store said it's trash, said the data is gone." Leo picked it up, examining the crack. "Cell phone stores just want to sell you stuff, Mr. Carter. I have a friend who runs a data recovery shop in the basement of the old mall. He's a wizard with this stuff. If the chip isn't cracked, the voice is still in there." My heart gave a hopeful thump. "I don't have any money left, Leo. My daughter, she took it all." Leo looked at me, his expression softening into something like respect. "You fixed my first car for a sandwich and a handshake, Mr. Carter. You don't owe us anything." He took the phone and promised to bring it back the next day.
But as he left, Sarah's SUV pulled back into the driveway. She wasn't alone this time. 2 men in scrubs were with her, and they were carrying a folder of commitment papers. "It's time, Dad. You're hallucinating, talking to kids who aren't there, and the house is a fire hazard with that generator. For your own safety, we're going now."
"I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice cracking but firm. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the small space feeling like a battlefield. The 2 men in scrubs looked uncomfortable. They weren't bad men, just people doing a job. "Mr. Carter," one of them said, his voice gentle, "your daughter has filed an emergency petition. She says you're unable to care for yourself, that you've lost touch with reality. We just need to take you for an evaluation." Sarah stood behind them, her arms crossed. "Look at him, Greg. He's freezing, he's not eating, and he's obsessed with a broken piece of plastic. He needs professional help." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the greed hidden behind the mask of concern. She didn't want me safe. She wanted the deed to the house so she could pay off her own mounting debts. I'd seen the collection notices in her car. "You're lying, Sarah," I said. "You stopped my checks. You cut the power. You're making me look crazy so you can steal what your mother and I built." One of the men looked at Sarah, then back at me. "Sir, if what you're saying is true, we can look into that, but right now the house has no heat and no running water. It's a health code violation. We have to take you." They moved toward me. I didn't fight. I didn't have the strength. I let them lead me to the van, but as I walked past Sarah, I leaned in close. "Your mother would be ashamed of you," I whispered. The color drained from her face, but she didn't stop them. They drove me to a facility on the outskirts of the city. It was clean, white, and smelled of bleach and despair. They put me in a room with a bed and a television that didn't work. I sat there for hours staring at the wall. I had no phone, no tools, no dog, and no Martha. I was just a number on a chart. But late that night, a nurse came in. She looked around to make sure the hallway was empty, then handed me a small wrapped package. "A young man named Leo left this for you," she whispered. "He said to tell you the wizard found something." My hands shook so hard I could barely tear the paper. Inside was my old flip phone, but the casing had been replaced with a sturdy, clear plastic. Attached to it was a small digital voice recorder with a single button labeled play. I pressed it. The first thing I heard was static, and then the clear, sweet sound of Martha's laughter. It was a recording I didn't even know I had. It was from a summer barbecue 10 years ago. "Ray, stop making that face and eat your burger." I closed my eyes, and for a moment, the white walls of the facility vanished. I was back in the sun, smelling the charcoal and feeling her hand on my shoulder. I listened to all the messages, one by one. The voice was safe. It wasn't trapped in a broken phone anymore. It was on this little black box, loud and clear. But then, as the last message ended, the recording continued. It wasn't Martha anymore. It was a recording of a phone call. Leo must have accidentally backed up the recent calls, too. It was Sarah's voice. She was talking to someone named Marcus. "Yeah, the old man's finally out," she said, her voice sounding sharp and triumphant. "The appraiser says we can get $350 for the lot. I've already moved the pension funds into the offshore account like you said. The lawyers won't find a paper trail because I used his old login to authorize the transfers. He's too tech illiterate to ever prove it wasn't him." There was more. Talk of forged signatures on the power of attorney and a plan to keep me sedated in a home so I couldn't testify. My blood turned to ice. She hadn't just been impatient, she'd been criminal. I looked at the nurse who was still standing by the door. She'd heard it too. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Is that your daughter?" she asked. I nodded, my heart heavy with a grief that surpassed even Martha's passing. My own child had traded my soul for a real estate commission. I looked at the recorder, then at the nurse. "I need a lawyer," I said, my voice no longer a whisper. "And I need to call the police." The next morning, the facility was buzzing. Sarah arrived early, probably to sign the final papers to commit me long term. She walked into my room with a fake smile, holding a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers. "How are you feeling, Dad? The doctor says you're resting well." I sat on the edge of the bed, the voice recorder hidden under my pillow. "I'm feeling clear, Sarah. Clearer than I've been in years." She sat in the chair next to me, her eyes darting to the door. "That's good, because we need to sign a few more things today, just to handle the sale of the house. It'll make things easier for everyone." I looked at her, searching for any trace of the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. She was gone. "I'm not signing anything, Sarah. In fact, I'd like my money back, all of it." Her smile faltered. "Dad, don't be difficult. You're confused. The money is being handled by a professional." I pulled the recorder from under the pillow and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, cold and calculating, talking about offshore accounts and forged signatures. The color vanished from her face, leaving her looking sallow and old. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, reaching for the device. I pulled it back. "A friend. You forgot that I have friends, Sarah. You thought because I'm old I'm invisible, but people see me." The door opened, and instead of the nurse, 2 detectives from the Parma Police Department walked in, followed by a man in a sharp suit. "Ms. Miller?" the detective said. "We have some questions about your father's accounts and a certain Marcus you've been communicating with." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, not of regret, but of a trapped animal. "Dad, please, it was for us, for our future." I looked away. "My future was in that house, Sarah, with your mother's memory. You didn't just take the house, you tried to take her voice." As they led her out in handcuffs, the lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, I'm here on behalf of the Veterans Legal Assistance. Leo told us everything. Let's get you home." Returning home was the hardest part. The house was still cold, the power still off, and the garage was empty. But as the sun set over the lake, the utility truck arrived. Within an hour, the lights flickered on and the furnace began its familiar, comforting hum. The lawyer had frozen all the accounts Sarah had touched. The money was being returned, and the house was legally mine again, free and clear. Buster was brought back from the shelter, his tail wagging so hard he nearly knocked over the kitchen table. I sat in my chair, the house finally warm. I picked up the voice recorder Leo had given me. I didn't play Martha's voice this time. I just held the device in my lap, feeling the weight of it. I had won. I had my dignity back, my home, and the truth. But the cost was my daughter. I knew I'd probably never see her again, except through glass in a visitation room. I looked at a photo of Martha on the mantel. She was smiling, her eyes bright and full of life. I realized then that her voice wasn't just on a chip or a phone. It was in the way Leo looked out for me. It was in the way the neighbors brought over casseroles the next day. It was in the strength I'd found to stand up for myself. I am 79 years old. I'm a veteran, a steelworker, and a widower. I am not useless. I am not a ghost. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, the warmth of the heater finally chasing away the chill that had lived in my bones for weeks. I pressed the button one last time. "Ray, I love you. Hurry home," the voice said. I smiled, a single tear finally escaping and rolling down my wrinkled cheek. "I'm home, Martha," I whispered into the quiet room. "I'm finally home."